Thank you for joining this Grassroots Oban discussion this evening. We are joined by Drew Hendry MP for Inverness, Nairn, Badenoch and Strathspey. He is the SNP Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy spokesperson in the House of Commons. The subject we are talking about this evening is the Internal Market Bill. Over to you, Drew. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for inviting me along tonight. And for being patient while we got past the little technical glitch of getting in there. This is a really important subject, and not enough people know the quite dramatic effects that the Internal Market Bill has on every aspect of life in Scotland. If it goes through in its current form at the moment, it means that from the water you drink, to the food on your table, to the NHS, to the health regulations that we have, things like alcohol minimum pricing, to the teaching standards in our schools, to the food that we farm, every aspect of life will be affected by this in a negative way in Scotland. And it's quite a big subject, so I'm going to range around it for a few minutes, and of course, happy to take questions if there are any at the end of this. First of all, it's important to say that the Internal Market Bill, which has been put forward by the Tories as being necessary in order to make sure that there's smooth trading conditions across the nations of the UK, is simply not required. There are already existing common frameworks that have been worked out for differences with EU standards. And indeed, there were productive and ongoing talks between the governments around the UK about how to take these things forward. And these common frameworks were very easy to put in, with a few changes to essentially standing orders and with the agreements of the different governments around the UK. So it's not required, but now that they've put it in place, let's examine indeed what it is. First of all, it's a blatant attempt, determination to break international law. And I think that's been the most well-covered part of it, that this tears up the withdrawal agreement, which Boris Johnson said that we should all vote for, that it was going to be the best thing, and things were going to be really easy from here. And this was the thing he put forward himself to the House of Commons. And now it's something they just want to tear up. The implications of that, of course, are that by breaking this law, they're setting the precedent for breaking any law, and of course affecting negatively, along with the whole of the UK's international reputation, that of Scotland, by being dragged along with this act, which has been roundly condemned, not just in Europe, but perhaps most loudly by those in the nations that the UK government are looking to court for trade deals, such as the US, where Joe Biden has already said that anything that interferes with the Good Friday Agreement, the peace accord between Northern Ireland and Ireland, will lead to no deal being done. So it's actually strangely self-defeating, and you could see them, the Tories, scrambling recently to try and backpedal on what they've been saying to Biden and cozy up to the Biden administration. It's not going to work. Nancy Pelosi in the Senate has been, the Speaker of the House of Representatives has been very strident about the fact that they won't endorse any trade deal with the UK that is breaking international law as a result of this action. So I'll push that to one side because that's bad enough with it. But what this Internal Market Bill does to Scotland is it exposes the Tories taking the biggest power grab since devolution was put in place. And it is typical of the Tories. I've got to say, their long-standing hatred for devolution, that this is designed to just overrule the Scottish Parliament, and it's designed in a number of ways with that. I believe, and I'm sure that everybody watching this at the moment believes, that Scotland's spending priorities must be set by the Scottish Parliament, not by the Westminster Parliament. For a start, you can't trust any Tory or Westminster government to act in the best interests of Scotland, and that's why we demanded devolution, why it was the overwhelming settled will of the Scottish public to have the Parliament return to Scotland. But more and more as this goes forward, with the Constitutional Affairs Committee of both the House of Commons and the House of Lords, with the Welsh Government, with the Scottish Parliament except the Tories, excuse me, with almost everybody who's examined this saying that it's a blatant power grab. And I could go on with the organisations, the National Farmers Union, National Farmers Union of Scotland, the STUC, the TUC, and Uncle Tom Cobley and all have said that this is a power grab. It is. There's no debate. This is exactly what it is. And the difficulty with this is that, let alone the Westminster Parliament being able to overrule the Scottish Parliament, this actually enables Quango, an unelected Quango, which will sit on basically, ruling on trade technicalities in the UK to overrule the Scottish Parliament. But worse than that, it allows one single government minister to overrule anything that the Scottish Parliament might put in place. And that's the minister that I shadow in the House of Commons, the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, who can, without consultation, just decide that he's going to impose different rules as it affects Scotland. Now, the really important thing to bear in mind with this bill that they're putting forward is that when they say there's a power surge coming back to Scotland, I think Mike Russell said it best when he said that if this is a power surge, it's the one that fuses all your sockets and blows out your box for it, because basically what they can do now is just run over anything we've got. England, by definition, is a larger country than Scotland, and if they decide that the food standards, for example, the rules governing food standards have to be adjusted so that they can import chlorinated chicken, and that's a very, very real threat. That's not hyperbole, or indeed hormone-injected beef, and they decide that in England this is what they want to have. It doesn't matter how it affects our farmers, how it affects our health priorities, and chlorinated chicken is a pretty horrible product when you find out about the condition the animals have to be in to produce this, and the reason they have to be washed in chlorine because of the fact that they've been sitting in their own muck for so long with so many parasites on them. So these things are a real priority, and in fact, we know from Donald Trump, he said that anything is on the table, and that's what the Americans, regardless of the administration, will be looking for in any trade deal with the UK. They'll want to make sure that their products are able to be sold here. So if those are allowed in England, they can basically then use this law to say that there shouldn't be unfair competition against those rules in Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland. And when it comes to the NHS, the possibility of it being privatised and medicine supplies being privatised is now wide open, because this internal market bill, through the conditions of saying that there must be a level playing field for companies to bid for things, could easily take the NHS in Scotland, the Scottish Government, to court to actually get access to services that they want to provide. So all of these things are in the internal market bill. It's unfortunately largely slipped under the radar, I think, of the mainstream media. There's been scant comment on it, but it is an absolutely foul and determined attempt to strip powers away from Scotland, and shows contempt not just for the Scottish Parliament, which it does in spades, but it also shows contempt for the Assembly in Wales and in Northern Ireland as well. So the final thing I would say about the internal market bill before questions is, like I say, I could talk about this for an hour, 2 hours, probably even longer, but the final thing I'll say about it before we go to questions is this issue of the so-called UK Shared Prosperity Fund. And what that's supposed to do when it eventually appears is replace the EU structural funds. So this is that we've been using for many years, and indeed, you know, we benefit from £863 million of them just recently. Now, this isn't largesse from the UK government. This is money we're losing because we're coming out of the EU. And even if it was largesse, they've not been able to tell us how much, how it'll be used, what the rules will be around it, other than, and this is the important thing to them, that any money spent on it will come along with a Union Jack that they'll stick on the projects that qualify for it. So that's the Shared Prosperity Fund. I've been asking for details, by the way, on that since 2017. And they still don't, even with little over a month to go before we exit the transition, they still don't know, or still won't tell us, I should say, what's going to happen to that money. And then spending priorities, on that and on everything else, we know from the Tories that their track record is absolutely out there for everybody to see. People might not remember in the early 70s, in the early 80s, when John Major decided to rob the Highlands of funding in order to shore up constituencies in the southeast of England, which they needed for the election. And of course, you will be aware of Boris Johnson's well-known view that a pound spent in Croydon is better than a pound spent in Strathclyde. And by that, of course, he means Scotland with it. So I think that's quite a lot in terms of giving you an overview of the Internal Market Bill. And I'll stop there and just see if there are any questions that you want to have answered on that subject.
Thank you very much for that, Drew. And in listening to you, the frustration that I don't know how you people, I can imagine how you people in the belly of the beast must feel listening to being trashed. But certainly, I'm sure for all of us listening here, it is despondency at best, and a complete denial that there is another viewpoint that must be listened to. I have got, yeah, go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, well, the one thing, thanks for that, and it is galling when you have to be down there responding to this kind of, just illegal and disrespectful and insulting behaviour to the people of Scotland and our Parliament. But the one positive you take from this is that when people actually find out about this, they become absolutely convinced that the only way to deal with things in Scotland is to become an independent country.
Absolutely right. We've had a question. Ariel K, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Hi, Drew. With the confluence of the Overseas Operations Bill, the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Bill, and boldly announcing to the world that they're quite happy to flout international law, the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Bill, if people don't know, explicitly gives permission to several UK agencies, including, I think, the Food Standards Agency, to commit acts which, out with those circumstances, would be criminal for purposes such as the integrity, I think, or the benefit of the UK economy. How worried should people in the independence movement be, whether we're just ordinary people handing out flyers and posting things online, or leaders of yes groups, or people who attract more attention? Because with the confluence of those things in the last few weeks, with the emphasis on James Bond, which is basically glorifying extrajudicial state-sponsored murder, is so glorified as mass entertainment, its postponement shut down the entire cinema industry in the UK. How worried should we be? What's to stop them picking off random individual Scottish independence supporters?
Well, first of all, I think the issue with this is that rather than worried, we should be determined. We have just a short 6 months away the election to the Scottish Parliament. If we are working in the way we should to get SNP MSPs elected in the numbers that we know that we can do, and on current circumstances we should do, then we will have an undeniable, we will be in an undeniable position in order to both call the referendum and to be internationally judged to have done it correctly, so that we can be recognised by the international community, which is so important in this. Already the Tories are backtracking on the outright opposition to this. Keir Starmer's backtracked on outright opposition because they know it's unsustainable with the growing majority of people that are for independence. So our ticket out of this, rather than being worried, our ticket out of this is to work as efficiently and as quickly as possible to become an independent country. And these other things are worrying, they are concerning. The internal market bill, which I've been deeply involved in, is a horrendous piece of legislation, and without independence it would leave us in a very bad state. But I think we've just got to make our own paths. It's the best answer I can give on that.
Okay, Valerie Gold, can you unmute yourself with your question, please?
Hi there, good evening. Thanks for the introductory talk, that was brilliant.
Pleasure.
I'm sure like a lot of people here, I'm genuinely horrified, if not a bit scared, by the possible implications of this bill. The threat to our parliament, our health service, and also free student tuition, just to name only 3 things. As an ordinary citizen and a grassroots SNP member, what could I be doing to combat this?
Well, there's 2 things. One, as a grassroots member, then obviously what I've just said is we need to work really hard to make sure we get the right result in the election. The priority, I think, is to get the message out there about this internal market bill, because, like I say, I think it's flying under the radar largely just now. Even many people that I'm speaking to in the SNP haven't really heard about it. And I think it's our duty to try and make people know that this is what they're doing to your parliament. 58% of people in the last opinion poll want independence. A shed load more than that want our Scottish Parliament to remain. There's a lot of people there. About 70% of folk think that it's a great idea that we have a Scottish Parliament. So, so we need to get the message out there that this threat is out there. There's plenty of material on it. If anybody wants to go to either my Facebook page or my website, I get links to debates and things like that. But just get the word out there about the effects on this.
Thank you very much. If I could just get a totally shameless plug in, like my colleague who's in the Zoom, Fiona McGregor, I'm a presenter on Indie Live Radio, and we will be interviewing somebody about the internal market bill tomorrow between 11 and 1 on indielive.radio. We'll be talking to Heather Anderson, but I'm delighted to be here tonight. Sorry, I'll shut up now. Thank you so much.
Nothing shameless about that at all, Valerie. Great to have you here. And I've got Sheena Stephen. Sheena, are you up for asking your question? You've got 2 great questions there.
Hi, yes, hi. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you fine, yeah.
Yeah. I'm really, I'm like Valerie, whom I know, I'm really concerned. I find it absolutely amazing that people within the SNP and even in Holyrood don't know about this bill. It's just absolutely all-consuming, unbelievable. Well, it's not really, it's a Tory government, but it's scary. What I'd written in the chat was, I'm concerned, and I don't know, another thing I don't know much about is this building in Edinburgh where these 3,000 civil servants, I mean, that's another thing that's been hidden from the public. I've been trying to tell people that, what is the purpose of this building? Are these civil servants going to be come up from down south, or are there going to be 3,000 people from Scotland that are going to be employed in this building? And what is their function? Is it integrated with this internal market bill for them to legislate on this legislation rather than We've got a parliament that can do that already, and taxpayers should be aware that this is extra money that's getting spent. Their money is getting spent on this. I don't know how much the building was to build, but the press, I mean, nobody knows anything about this building.
Yeah.
So,
the good news about the Tories and all of their plans, including Queen Elizabeth House and all the fact of bringing up the UK government to Scotland and Boris Johnson coming on visits and
yes, the
eating
cabinet,
fish and chips on a trawler and all this kind of thing. The good thing about the Tories is they just completely don't get Scotland.
no.
And all their belated attempts to show that they are somehow engaged, which is the best thing I can, the best kind of description I can kind of give is somehow engaged, are just proving to people that they're completely out of touch and it's too late. And all of these things that they're doing are tokens. They're not genuine efforts to engage with people. Otherwise, when they do come up and do these things, they would meet the press and the public when they're here. They don't. They do photo ops and then buzz back down to Westminster again.
What are these 3,000 civil servants? What are they going to be doing? Have you any idea?
Well, again, I would ask you to look at the track record of the Tories when they say they're going to do something, and then have a look to see what they actually plan to do or what they do. If you think they're going to employ 3,000 people in Edinburgh, I would have to say I think that's extremely unlikely. They said they would build 13 warships in the Clyde. They said they'd do half a dozen other things which are grand plans that they were going to do in Scotland. We had all the stuff that they were involved with over the past few years. Boris Johnson makes a new promise every other day, which he then breaks every other day. So I don't think it's something to be worried about. I just think it is one of these tokenistic things that they're trying to put. They've got the building there, they've got the space there. I think they're seriously going to use it for anything other than propaganda and to try and do something against the Yes movement. No. I don't think it's there for any other productive reason than they felt they had to do something to show they were still, nominally interested in Scotland.
Okay, thanks.
Lovely. I've got Pat Farrington. Pat, all the way from Ireland. Would you like to put your question to Drew? And by the way, I'm liking the gender balance here this evening.
It's good to see. Thank you, Bridge. Much appreciated. I'm just worrying about Drew telling us a little bit about what it's like to be in Westminster. And my impression is that the Tories just keep lying. We all know they're lying. People are saying quite openly, that's a lie, but nothing seems to happen. Shouldn't the Speaker be able to do something about it? The SNP group is fantastic. They're doing an enormous amount of hard work, but you've really not got enough teeth to beat this 80 majority. And I just feel that it's not a waste of time. It's good that you're there and it's good that you have got a voice. But I feel that the Speaker is just ignoring everything that happens and allowing Boris and his little cohort of ghastly cabinet people to do just what they like. Is there anything that can be done? Can we do anything? Thank you.
Well, how do you stop Tories lying in Parliament is what your question is in a nutshell.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
I've got to say, the two speakers that I've had experience of, John Bercow and Lindsay Hoyle, neither of them really has the power to tell them to do a different answer or to, in fact, there's a whole culture about not saying that people are lying in Parliament. I had to use a clever term last month to call them pathological liars, which was to say that they were verging on pseudologica fantastica, which is a clinical term. So I didn't get pulled up for it.
Well done.
But basically, the fact is that it's the stock in trade for Boris Johnson and his government, and And it's not uncommon for the 5 and odd years I've been there for two things to happen when a minister answers a question. One is for them to completely avoid answering the question by saying something completely different, which is 90% of the way. And then there's 9% barefaced lies. And then there's 1% when you actually get a genuine response. But it's that kind of ratio from it. I'm not saying the response is always one you want, but at least it's genuine. But it's really, really a very tiny percentage of those answers that you get. So I can't really say that the speaker has any particular powers to shape their answer. One of the things that we knew when we went down there is we knew we were going to be in the minority. What we've tried to do is use our voice and our ability to raise the issues to persuade people, not just in Scotland but around the UK and beyond, by using every opportunity we can to raise the issues that are important to Scotland. And I think in amongst all the frustration, which by the way I share with every single activist, I didn't get elected because I wanted a Westminster career. I got elected to do, in the classic way, to do myself out of a job, in the same way that SNP MPs went down there in the first place in order to make sure that none of us had a job at Westminster, and they all had we could set up a parliament in Scotland where people could get elected to that to represent us. So I feel the frustration, but I do also feel that we're making progress. And I think that is reflected in the way that we're not only viewed in Scotland, but we're actually viewed around the other nations of the UK. And I think it has given the strength to, for example, people in Wales and the Welsh Parliament and even the Labour Welsh government to be able to come out and say things. And I think that helps overall. But is it a perfect situation down there? Absolutely. The furthest thing from it. It's a complete and utter burdock, and it's a place where getting any sensible answer or the truth is an extremely difficult task.
Thank you. I really appreciate, I'm sure we all do, what you're doing there. And it sounds to us to be desperately frustrating. I don't know how you keep the temper, all of you, all the time. But I just feel that there should be some way, somewhere to get in the back and stop these lies. But we seem to have to accept the lies. We just seem to now, these days, years ago, if somebody lied in Parliament, they got thrown out. But it just seems acceptable now.
Yeah. This is a really important question you've asked, and I'll give you this comfort, because I believe this is true, and I believe in Scotland we've seen this, is that telling lies is a law of diminishing returns, and people will see the truth, and the truth wins out. So I think that's the important thing to take away. We always have been and need to be squeaky clean in what we do. But I actually think that pressure for us to be, to be as honest as we can, is actually a good thing, and it reflects on the trust in Scotland.
Thank you, much appreciated.
That was a lovely question, Pat, and actually I can feel your passion for trying to get the truth, and well done you for praising the work of all of them sitting down in Westminster, because they're totally disrespected, and we can see that, and that's never a nice thing. We have a question from Alison Fraser. Alison, if you unmute yourself.
Good evening, Drew. I'm particularly concerned that friends of mine who are not activists but support independence, and also my wider range of friends, know nothing about this bill. And it seems to me that the mainstream media are concentrating on the illegality part of it, but they're not doing their job by showing Scotland how it's going to impact on all of us. What can we do about that, or what can you do about that?
Well, I think I've lost count of the press releases that we've put out, and the We've given dozens of speeches on this in the Commons. It's been through the Scottish Parliament. The Scottish Parliament, every party except the Tories voted to withdraw consent from the bill. So there've been plenty of opportunities for the media to pick it up. I think you are right. There are two things. If I'm try to be scrupulously fair if I can, and if I give a scrupulously fair answer to the first part of it, I think the illegality, because it affects a wider community, if you like, than just Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, has got the top billing, because obviously it affects the European Union, deals with other countries and so forth. So it's a truly global aspect to the bill. So that part of me, that really fair part of me says, well, yeah, if you're in the press, that's going to be the key line on it. But of course, they did a lot on that. And then you haven't gone back to cover the facts as it affects Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, which is a real deficit. I think that is a deficit. And you asked what we can do. And again, all I can say is that we've got to use the power that we've got as a party, with a membership, with social media, with whatever we can, to Indie Live, all the rest of these things, to get that message out, which is why I'm really glad to be given the opportunity to speak to you here tonight about this, because I think it's important we do get that out there about how important this is. I mean, it's just a naked and shocking power grab. And it's been backed up by countless experts, organisations, legal bodies, that this is going to happen. Even the House of Commons committees and the Lords have pointed this out. You know, it's when you're getting unionist Lords pointing out that the SNP are right, then you know that's quite a thing. You know, so there's a wealth of sources out there, but it's just not permeated. So we've got to do our bit to get the message out.
Okay, thank you.
I've got, it was a statement actually, Drew, when I was looking at it, and it was a meeting, an online meeting of lawyers, and it was Lord Newberger. And he has said that once you deprive people of the right to go to court to challenge the government, you're in a dictatorship or in a tyranny. Is that what we're in?
Well, certainly what I think the bill risks, the saving principle for us is that we have an escape hatch from this, which is, independence. I think the time is coming upon us rapidly when we'll need to act on that, but I think that's going to plan at the moment, and I think when we get to the May elections, that will be the real trigger for frenetic action about this. But yeah, you've got to say that the Cummings, Boris Johnson, it's Cummings-led, let's make no mistake about this, the Boris Johnson Tory government, even to the disquiet of quite a lot of their own MPs, even those ones elected under the strict rules that they put in place, want to take as much power and put it into the centre as they possibly can. And that's what they're aiming to do with a number of different things. And this bill is perhaps the single most shocking and blatant of them all. But as I say, we have a way out. We have the ability to have a better Scotland, and that's through making sure we're still talking to people about independence, and we get a big election victory next year, and then we move swiftly on to a vote.
Oh, well, I'm so pleased you mentioned the big election next year and the vote. Section 30, yeah. We're looking at Westminster running roughshod over all of our wills with regards to this bill. And then we're talking about an independence referendum. And I think quite rightly, people must be getting frustrated. If we've got no power to make Westminster listen to us, what makes us think that we're going to get a Section 30? I want a big positive note here, Drew. I need my...
Yeah, well, the thing is, what they want to do is they want to knock us off by saying they want to refuse a Section 30. What they want us to do is to start to fall apart at the seams and come up with lots of other schemes. Now, it doesn't work that way. The popular will always win out. And if we persuaded 58% of people so far, and I think it's around about that, I don't think that's an outlier poll, and we move to persuade even more people during the coming months as they see the effects of a low deal or no deal Brexit, then that number will only go higher. They will be unable to resist the popular will in Scotland if that's the case, and they know it. What they, as I say, what they want to do is by saying that they'll withhold permission, is deny the sovereignty of the Scottish people, which won't hold water. And they want us to run off doing all kinds of other things which will dilute and split the cause and will put off a lot of those people who are either newly won over to independence or are still swithering. And that's their tactic. So I'm not going to let them off the hook for that. Neither are my colleagues. We're going to pursue them absolutely down this route. It's the right of any nation's peoples to decide what they want to do. The people of Scotland have for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years been sovereign, and that's exactly what they are, and we'll prove that they are next year.
And while we're on, see Pat, a sigh of relief there. So while we're on that, so the internal market bill, that is going to go through. How can we undo the damage of that bill? How quickly can we undo the damage of that bill? Should we get a referendum next year and get our result?
Well, we can very quickly undo the damage of the bill, because by virtue of being independent, by virtue of getting to that stage, we would be able then to reimpose the standards that we want to see in Scotland. We'd be able to align ourselves with EU standards. We're already fully compliant at the moment with EU standards, so providing there's not too much time between both, we should be able to unravel that particular aspect of the internal market bill in terms of the harm that it does very, very quickly. And if I could also say that, in terms of future trading relationships, social relationships, I think everybody knows that what we want to do is we want to be good friends and neighbours with England, Wales and Northern Ireland in the future, whatever they decide to do and their people decide to do in their future. And as England's second biggest trading partner behind America, I think they're going to be looking to have a friend north of their border in the future as well. So there's plenty that we can do by keeping on the track we're on at the moment and making sure that we have a legitimised independence referendum that obeys the law and is recognised internationally as such.
Okay, well, I think that's a good news story for tonight. And we have got a question from a man. Woohoo! I'm so pleased that they have found their voice. It's unusual. So let's have Gordon Shanks. I'm frightened him now. Gordon, are you there?
Hi, that's me. Sorry. Hi, Drew. How are you doing?
Hi, Gordon.
Just a quick question. This is such a mind-bogglingly important issue. I think that could it actually warrant having a dedicated, carefully written document sent out from the Scottish Government to every household in the land, clearly stating the facts, honestly and in layman's terms, and backed by as many parties in the Parliament as possible that support or that are against the bill. Just say, this is what's happening, these are the facts, decide for yourself.
That's an interesting idea, and I'll certainly flesh that out with colleagues in the Scottish Parliament. I suspect that wouldn't be under the power of the Scottish Government to do that. And I suspect that whilst there is complete agreement other than the Tories in the Scottish Parliament, the other parties in the Scottish Parliament would be less likely to support something like that because they would see it as overtly political. I saw flashing up the screen a comment there that maybe the SNP could do it. I'm pretty sure that we will be. It's important to put one thing into context just now. The bill has gone through its reading in the House of Commons and it's now in the House of Lords, and the first stage of that's just been thumpingly defeated. So it has to, at the end of November, it'll have to come back to the House of Commons again and then probably back to the House of Lords. So, you know, so this is going to be rumbling on for some time yet, and we've yet to see what, if anything, will be watered down within it. But ultimately, since the Tories have a big majority in the House of Commons, and we know exactly what they want, I don't think we can rely on that watering down process. So I think at some point, you know, either we or us or, you know, a collection of different organisations will need to get the message out a bit more strongly about it.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have another question coming in? Well, while we are waiting, because I've got another piece here. When you were talking about the atmosphere in Westminster, and we're talking about the Section 30, is there now an acceptance that Scotland is going to be independent? And do you see a mood change, even in their total abhorrence of the SNP group down there?
Yeah, I do see a mood change. I think there is two different kind of, the Tories fall into two camps. There are those who I think have pretty much decided that they want, you know, England to be independent. There's a few of those, but don't forget that they've wanted England to be independent, just call it Britain, for quite a long time. The other group, I think, are the ones who are trying to circle the wagons, and they're self-defeating move and just get more and more hostile by the day. It's really important to understand the atmosphere in Westminster is quite weird, because a lot of them just simply don't get Scotland. They think, some of them genuinely think they're being altruistic, despite the facts. Some of them don't care, and quite a lot of them don't care about Scotland. And the others know that they want to keep the assets of Scotland with it. But I never get any feeling of, and anybody correct me if they're wrong, if they've been watching any of the parliamentary procedures, I never get any feeling there's any real love for Scotland down there. I've never really felt that kind of genuine affection for it, other than the odd recounting of when they were on holiday there, and their shooting parties and things like that. But yeah, that's basically how they seem to act.
Got a question from Chris Odling. Chris, can you unmic yourself? A little delay. Hi, Chris. Okay, so I'm going to go to Elaine. While we're waiting,
it won't work.
Will it not?
We can't. I've unmuted. It won't work.
Well, we can hear you, Chris. Can you hear me?
You can hear us.
Yeah, it's working. Yoo-hoo!
I can hear you, Chris.
Oh,
just speak loudly and clearly.
oh well, we were watching Gordon Ross IndyCar, and he was saying he'd heard that Cummings' sister is involved with the company that does all the counting. So how do we stop fiddly diddly when it comes to the independence vote?
Well, fortunately, the things that are not in the internal market bill are the things that we still will control next year. So the Scottish Parliament still calls elections and referendums and has control over the voting, you know, procedure. So, sorry, you'll need to speak up, Chris.
Will Scottish people count it? It won't.
Yeah. It is. People, not necessarily Scottish people, but people in Scottish local authorities who are employed will do the counting. You know, I was formerly leader of Highland Council, and whenever there was an election, Highland Council would get mobilised, including the referendum in 2014, to do the vote counts. And that'll be exactly the same, just as it was for the Brexit referendum. It was all done on a local authority basis. So They can't, as things stand, interfere with that. Sure, they would love to, but at the moment they can't.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, so here's the term we have to remember. Fiddledy-diddledy. So if we hear that word, we know that it is people at Westminster in particular are tampering with the election system. I've got Alistair MacDonald. Alistair, your question?
Hi there, Drew. The question really was connected to an answer you gave earlier, that the bill would be going to has been to the Lords the first time, and it's getting punted back to the Commons. How long will the procedure take before finally the Queen puts her signature to the bill and passes it into law?
Well, technically, my understanding is that it can take, I don't believe this will happen, but technically I believe it can take up to nearly a year, depending on how the House of Lords treat the bill as it goes through. They've got quite a lot of power to delay things. So it really depends on what they come out with in terms of what they send back in as an amended bill, how much the UK government want to dig their feet in. As I say, the problem with this is that they don't need the internal market bill. So they could actually afford to wait it out and just go ahead with common frameworks in the meantime, which is what they should be doing anyway. Or they could decide that they're going to try and somehow guillotine it and move it through before the end of the year. At the moment, I can't give you a solid answer on the timescale because it's really down to factors out with my control and to be honest, out with everyone's control other than the procedure at the moment. So it depends on how it moves from there.
Okay, thanks.
Is that okay? Excellent, Alistair, thank you. We've got a question from Elaine. Elaine McKenzie, are you ready for your question? And then we'll take Joy Cameron afterwards, if that's okay.
Hi there, Drew. Good to speak to you. If you think the legislation will pass through by the 31st of December, do you think that the Tories will aggressively move then towards Scotland and possibly Wales to do as much damage as possible, to take over as much as possible? And the other question to that would be, do you actually see Boris Johnson being in power on the 1st of January? Or do you think that some of the major players in this will just disappear and step back because they will have done what they set out to do, made their money and just go?
Yeah, I think on the second part first, you know, I don't think Boris Johnson will be there for long, but long could mean 6 months to a year, you know, in terms of his ability to hang on. I think it's deeply unpopular with most Tories now, including most of the Tories in the House of Commons. But he did recruit a lot of pliant MPs in the last election, and I think it would take some gumption for them to oust them before Christmas or before the new year. So, but who knows? They're Tories, so they're perfectly capable of stabbing each other in the back, and it could happen, you know, almost any time that they could choose to do that. But my gut instinct is that it will certainly be into the new year before there's any real threat. I don't think it'll be there in the long term. No, that's for sure. Will they disappear? No, I think that you'll just get another version of the same things. And the first part of the question is, do you think they'll come after us in terms of Scotland and Wales? Look, you have to just get to the fact that the Tories have always hated devolution. They do anything they can to get rid of it. They don't like it. They don't want it. I don't think they've got the ability to do it as quickly as we might fear that they would like to do it. But the internal market bill is certainly the first step, and it heightens the urgency for us to make sure that we've got the right numbers and we've got the right message, and we've spoken to people to embrace them into making a yes vote for independence.
Do you really think that Boris Johnson's going to want to hang around after Brexit? Because I think there's going to be a terrible calamity down south.
Yeah, Oh, you know, again, I think he hates doing the job, but then he hates doing any work. You know, that's just the way, you know, the way Boris Johnson is. You know, he wanted to be elected and become some version of Churchill that he had in his mind, and that's never going to happen. I think he finds it deeply uncomfortable not being able to take on all these other jobs and things like that. He can't wait to get out in the after dinner circuit and start charging big money for appearances. So yeah, no, I don't think he wants to stay. But again, I don't think there's going to be any immediate change. There won't be. He won't want to be thrown out. He'd want to somehow find a time of his own choosing, which, you know, may well be after Brexit, but I don't know when he's going to get the comfort to do that, because come the 2nd of January on a low deal or no deal, it's going to become pretty obvious to people what a mess he's got everyone into.
Okay, Elaine, are you happy with that? Well,
okay.
Joy Cameron. Joy, are you with us?
Yes, both myself and Campbell are here. It's actually Campbell that would like to ask this question, so I shall acquiesce to him just in this instance.
I kind of felt that we had to get the male balance here a wee bit closer. It was becoming...
Sorry, could you lean in a wee bit to the microphone? I couldn't quite hear you there.
I was just thinking through, it's about time we were getting the male balance here a wee bit more, I thought.
It's nice to be in the minority as white middle-aged men, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely, I only jest. I was wondering about procurement. It seems, I mean, you as former leader of Highland Council knows the difficulties that you have trying to get something procured quickly and effectively, and you have to go through hoops and with Europe and so on and so forth. It seems that Westminster can circumnavigate this, or at least the Tory government. And I'm thinking about the ferries awarded, for example, to a company with no record and no ownership of any ferries. How are they getting away with that?
Well, the fact of the matter is because people in England keep voting for them. And I'm afraid if you look at the recent polls, you know, they don't seem to be dented in England at all by the stuff that they're up to. I mean, the scandals are as long as your arm, and they're legendary. Robert Jenrick's still a government minister, despite having been caught red-handed helping his pals out with avoiding millions and billions of pounds in tax, and also, you know, acting in the most outrageous way with pork barrel politics in terms of giving funding to constituencies that were English Tory marginals. You know, and again, we're talking about many, many millions of pounds in each of these constituencies. So, you know, and then you've got the Chris Grayling scandals, all the scandals over, you know, what we've seen with the PPE requirements that during the COVID crisis have just been given to companies that are known associates of government ministers. You know, so all that goes on, but it just seems to be washing over folk. And not all of them by any means, but a lot of people in England, and that's why they're able to get away with it. You know, it's not sustainable. That's the only good thing I can say. Eventually, you know, folk will waken up and do something about it. But I think there's still such a Tory voting focus on Brexit and what they believe is going to be the land of milk and honey, which they're going to get a sharp realisation about very soon. That's just keeping them kind of going. So that's the reason they're kind of getting away with all that, you know, scandalous misuse of public money at the moment.
And effectively, there's nobody overseeing that at government level. You know, I mean, when I think of working with Highlands and Islands Enterprise and working through Argyll and Bute Council, there was always a certain paranoia among officials about, you know, Europe doing an audit, or you know, Audit Scotland doing an audit, or, you know, so on and so forth. On it goes. Nobody looking at government?
Well, you know, there are things like Public Accounts Committee and, you know, other bodies. You know, the UK government has been taken to court, particularly over issues like immigration issues, and forced to change their views on things. But to be honest, you could be taking this government to court every day you know, with the way they behave. And I think the problem is that I think the rules are written so with so much leeway for the government, UK government, that, you know, they can give £50 million ferry contracts to companies with no ferries and see no consequence from that, you know, other than a bit of ridicule.
Yeah, quite remarkable.
Thank you. Thank you, Campbell. And we've got Valerie Marshall, and then it'll be Fiona Ferris. Valerie, are you there?
Yes, hello. Thank you, Drew, for your time this evening. It's been really interesting. My question is, if the bill passes, does it give Westminster power to reverse our decisions about fracking in Scotland?
Yeah, there's every possibility that if the bill goes through, that something could be challenged by private companies. You know, if they are, for example, if the UK government decides that it wants to allow fracking in England, then because the principles of the internal market are that they shouldn't be disadvantaged through competition, then there's every chance that they could take the Scottish government or local authorities to court. Given the way the law is written, you've got to say that they would have a decent chance of winning that battle.
Thank you.
It's that scary.
It is.
This bill is,
very scary. I
it
think
covers
the bill,
every aspect of our, you know, our daily lives. It's, you know, it's very, very wide-ranging in terms of things that we would like to introduce our own regulations and rules for in Scotland.
there's been a lot of talk about the chlorinated chicken and the beef and all the other things. I wish that people could be made more aware of that fact as well, because I think that's a very scary prospect.
Well, within the bill, there's also the issue of being able to set building standards as a UK, basically, you know, priority that have to take precedence across the UK, which means that they could overrule building standards conditions in Scotland as well. So, you know, it really, you know, there's so much when you get into the depth of the internal market bill. There's so much it affects. Somebody mentioned tuition fees earlier. Again, you could be taken to court for that, to say that it's an unfair situation. So, you know, it's just multi-layered. Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice one, a nice one, Valerie. Yes, they got fracking. You know, you just don't think of how wide-ranging this is. Wow. Fiona, are you there? Can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, good evening. That's just set me up nicely for my question, actually, because I have to really query, are we sovereign at all when a bill like this that affects every single aspect of our lives can be passed without it going through and being asked of in the Scottish Parliament to approve it? In fact, the more I hear about how sovereign we are, the less evidence I see to back that up. In fact, everything I see happen proves exactly how unsovereign we are, whether it's from this bill, whether it's asking for a Section 30, or anything, Brexit, anything. We actually have no say. And soon, I think, not only will we, I feel we'll just keep saying, if we say it enough that we're sovereign, that somehow that's enough. But the evidence is very much the other way, as far as I can see.
Well, the reason I'll say that you and all of us here in Scotland are sovereign is because that is an immutable fact. It's never been disputed. Even in the UK Parliament, we took a motion through a couple of years ago on Scottish sovereignty. The difference is, and this is why it's crucial, we can choose to give away that sovereignty. We can continue down the line that we're going down with, you know, with the Tories and what they're doing, and allow them to do this bill and other bills like that, or we can choose to exercise our sovereignty and, you know, have a referendum on independence and declare Scotland an independent country as a result of that. So we still have a choice. We still have the ability to do that. We are at crunch time. I mean, you know, in my view, this is a crossroads, but I don't think that comes as a big surprise. I think everybody, you know, whether you support independence or not, whether you're in the SNP or in any party, knows that even without the internal market bill, we were coming to a crossroads. what this does is it puts the lines on the crossroads and says exactly what is going to happen if we don't make those choices about our sovereignty, if we don't choose to exercise it.
But we only can make that choice if we're allowed to make the choice. And that's really the issue at hand here, as far as I can see, because we're still, if we are sovereign, we shouldn't need a Section 30. I think it was a mistake to have gone down that path. We've painted ourselves into a corner that we can't get out of. We can't exercise our sovereignty now without having permission from another country.
Well, as I said earlier, the thing they most want to do in order to stymie the move to independence, the right of the Scottish people to choose their future, is to get us to go off on all kinds of different tangents just now. The rights of the Scottish people to determine their own future and to choose, should they wish to do so, to be an independent country are firmly with the Scottish people. They have no rights to resist that. And if next May we vote in sufficient numbers to make sure that there's, you know, a majority of MSPs in the Scottish Parliament who are demanding a referendum, and we put forward that referendum, they have no right to refuse that. They would love us to go down different routes and say, oh, we'll take court action here, or we'll do UDI or whatever, because they know that that would split the movement. They want us to be thinking like that. What we've got to do is actually make sure that we're absolutely resolute, that we fully understand international law, that we understand that to become an independent country, you have to be recognised as an independent country. And that's absolutely vital. So what I say is we've got to steel our nerves here. We've got to make sure that we've got the absolute focus and determination to not be denied our rights as a sovereign nation, as a sovereign people, because that's what we are. So I can see, I totally get why people are worried. And in my moments when I'm looking around frustrated with what they're doing in the UK Parliament, there are times when I think it's pretty dark as well. But I've got to say the fire that always keeps me going is the fact that we just cannot be denied. And we will have our democratic choice. And we will, in my view, choose to make that democratic choice to become an independent nation and take our own place in the world, as opposed to being saddled to this busted flush, Tory-driven, you know, small UK, small-minded UK that they've turned into.
Okay, is that okay? We've got Leah Gunn Barrett, who's been waiting patiently. Leah, you've got a question?
Yeah, just to follow up on the Section 30, then I'll follow my question. I just think if we go for a Section 30, you're putting all the cards in Boris's hand. He can call the timing, determine the question, and set the entire ball game. And so we are going as supplicants. So I think that is it might be the public strategy, but I think the government, the SNP, needs to have definitely another route when and if that fails. But my question really was, I'm a new SNP member in Edinburgh, and I've been trying to find out information on the progress that the SNP's made on developing an independent Scottish currency, which was voted at the spring 2019 conference. And I can't find anything, and I don't think there's been any work done. And I'm just generally concerned that there's no preparation. We talk about getting a referendum, and yet the groundwork needs to be laid. And I think that the SNP has been remiss, unless I'm missing something, in not actually communicating what their policy is on a central bank, on an independent currency, what is going to happen to pensions. These were questions that tripped up the Yes campaign in 2014, because we didn't have answers for them. And you can already see the mainstream press, the Tory press, the unionist press, going after us on that. And so we need to have, I think, clear and confident answers. And I'm just wondering where the leadership is from the SNP. Yes movement can certainly come up with answers, but unless it has some authority behind it, it's really not going to be taken seriously.
Okay, well, thank you, Leah. The first thing I would do is I would agree with what you said in the first part when you were talking about the Section 30, because it is important that should it fail, that you have, you said when and if it fails, that you should have another tactic for them. But Boris Johnson doesn't hold all the cards. The UK government don't hold all the cards. The world is watching Scotland. And if Scotland votes for something, if Scotland votes to have our view heard about independence, there will be international recognition of that. You know, it would be impossible not to see that there's been a democratic process that we've gone through, a referendum that we've held. I think the other part of your question was about the preparedness for the answering the questions about independence. And there's 2 points I'd make about that. First, the Scottish Government has been doing work. There's already a bill for a referendum in the Scottish Parliament, which is going through in order to prepare the groundwork for that. But let's be absolutely honest here. What the Tories, the people who would see Scotland being saddled to a Tory government for God knows how long, would love us to do is to turn the debate away from our right to choose into what currency are you going to use. So it's self-defeating for us to be talking about issues that will take the distraction, that will be providing a distraction for the fact that we have a right to choose first, before we get into a referendum campaign. Now, there are lots of answers to these questions. There's some very good and very straightforward answers. The currency one's already been answered in the SNP's conference. We passed the motion saying that as soon as possible we'd move to have our own currency. No nation, just for example here, no nation the night it votes for independence has a new currency the next day, and neither would we. But what we have said is as soon as possible we'll have our own currency. So the answer is there. But what they would really like to do is take it away from fighting the battle on the rights of the Scottish people to fighting the battle on the minutiae of what you would do if you got that right.
Yeah, I think I take what you say. That's fine, but we're still going to be asked very specific questions, and people need to make a decision based on their own interests. And it's not a new thing to have a currency. There are 60 countries that have become independent in the last few decades. And so we should be able to answer questions like what's going to happen to your pension. We should have those answers up and ready to give to people.
Well, we do.
Confident. Well, where are they? I haven't seen them.
Those answers are freely available. We've always said that we would protect pensions, for example, that we would look to try and match some of the pensions in Europe. The UK as it stands has got the worst pensions in Europe. You know, so the answer is pretty simple with the pensions one. You can't trust the Tories to look after your pensions. You never have been able to. You can't trust Westminster and successive governments there. What you can do is you can look to other independent countries around Europe and see how they've protected and enhanced pensions, and Scotland would do exactly the same. Your pension is safe under law, not under a UK government or a Scottish government. Your pension as it's been accrued up until now is protected. These things are going to financial funds in order to pay for them going forward. So they can't take your pension away. All we can do as an independent nation is make your pension better.
All right, that's great. I'm happy for you to say that, but I'm also confused why the Holyrood government is spending time on the GRA bill and the hate crimes bill when there are more pressing issues to address. I'm confused by that.
I'm not going to get this. This is about the internal market bill tonight, so I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole with other types of things. But what I would say, Leah,
yeah, but it impinges on the march towards independence.
Listen, you know, we would be pilloried as a government in Scotland if we weren't doing the day job. In fact, that's what they tried to say last time. You're not doing the day job, you're focused on independence. And all of these things, and by the way, the likes of the hate crime legislation and so forth, if people are going to be spreading hate, then, they shouldn't be. We should be bringing forward, in a progressive country like Scotland, we should be bringing forward legislation to stop people, using that kind of tactics for people. Now, but not getting into the ins and outs of all of those different things. Domestic legislation in Scotland is really important. The Internal Market Bill wants to take away our ability to set internal domestic legislation. So I think it's entirely right that whether you agree with the hate crimes bills, the GRA, the better roads, provision for free school meals over the Christmas period, I think it's entirely right that the process of the Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament continues with the day job while we're talking to people about the prospects for independence.
Okay, we've got a question, if that's okay, Leah. Thank you. We've got a question from David, and his question is, what's stopping Westminster from cancelling the May elections and replacing with a postal vote, and who would you trust that system with? Who would trust that system?
Okay, well, at the moment, there is everything stopping the UK government from taking such action, because the powers to hold the elections in May lie with the Scottish Parliament. And so they don't have the ability to do that. Look, you know, I'm not going to say that, you know, there's no possibility they could try and rush in a bill to do it, but it would be a pretty bald-faced, even worse than the internal market bill by about the factor of 1 million, to try and do that before the elections. And I think it would mean that, if not in the short term, because they put off those elections, but you would see support for independence in the high 90s if they were going to try and do that just to stymie the right of the Scottish people to vote. So I don't see that as a credible threat in the short term. But hey, they're Tories. You know, you can't trust those guys.
Okay, and I'm going to give a plug now to Sandra Reynolds. Sandra, do you want to tell us about the Constitution for Scotland? Quick plug.
Hi. I'm no expert, so I really can't tell you about it, but I was on a Zoom 2 nights ago to kind of launch the website to build a constitution, and it's an interactive website, so people can go on, give their opinions, look at it, read it, add things to it, or just simply like things. So it covers a lot of the issues that have been mentioned tonight. Look, apart from why we're here for. So there's a lot of people on here, so it'd be a useful thing to share with your own groups and have some say. You know, I heard somebody talking about pensions, about the currency. There's a currency group setting up options as well, and on the interactive constitution it talks about a bank, a central bank as well, which is well on the way. I think understand that, a Scottish central bank. So it might be a useful place for you to get some answers and share your opinions.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Sandra. Well, I had promised Drew that I would try to get him out after 1 hour, and he's now been here 1 hour and 20 minutes. And I think you will agree that he has given generously of his time and with the answers. So a big thank you to Drew. Are you?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me tonight. It's been a real pleasure to see the members in Argyll and beyond, if for those who are watching in. I'd love to do it again sometime.
Thank you very much. And everybody else.